Matthew Peterson is the Vice President of Education at the Claremont Institute and also the founding editor of AmericanMind.org, and Claremont.org is where you can find him. Matthew, I can't thank you enough for coming on today and being so far ahead of this particular topic. We are in real trouble. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, absolutely. I can't thank you enough for being one of the few people willing to talk about this in the last month. We are in real trouble, and what's disturbing is everyone knows it. Everyone can see what's going to happen, and they'll describe it in different ways, but we know that there is a very high probability that this election is not decided on Election Day. That's by design, changes in voting procedures by the Democratic Party, an enormous push midstream to change the rules and regs. And we know what's going to happen after when Trump and others on the Republican side decide to fight it. And I just heard on NPR this morning, they're already talking about, what will Facebook do? What will Twitter do? Can they cut off the president's communication? So this is a constitutional crisis by design, and it's already underway.
So, Matthew, I talked to Senator Ron Johnson this morning about this, and I said, what is the American government doing? And what is the GOP doing? There's no one wargaming. They have been wargaming, and in their own words, they say that everything we've seen on the streets has just been dry runs to prepare them for what's coming at the election. We're not... we don't survive as a republic if there's not another side.
Yeah, and what we're seeing is the consequence of really years of mismanagement and head in the clouds for the GOP. What strikes me is that over and over again, the debates, everything that's happened in the last few weeks, you see, besides Trump fighting for himself, there's just not there's not a hell of a lot there. There's not the infrastructure. So as we said in this editorial, where's the rights George Soros? Where's the rights Transition Integrity Project? Now, there's lots that the government should be doing, including, prosecuting these groups that are committing acts of violence. But I will say, it's hard for anyone in the federal government to kind of put together a plan that's flexible and broad enough. This is really an election type thing, right? This is really what the campaign strategist should be doing. This is what your Fusion GPS, if you have one, should be working on. But here's the problem, Glenn. We don't have one. We don't have our own groups and infrastructure outside of the federal government working on these problems. And if we don't start to create that infrastructure, we're not only going to lose in November, we're going to lose forevermore. And that, I think, is the main problem. So what we need is elites who are, actually people in power on the right to come together and start to work on this. Okay. Because we don't have the infrastructure.
So let me ask you this, though. That's talking down the road. If this happens here, you've read the report, the executive summary spells it all out. Even if there's a clear Trump win, they are trying to change the whole makeup of our system. And if they do win, it all changes. We will never see the republic as we know it ever again. And that's not hyperbole, I believe. So what does the average person do? How do we react to this when it begins?
Well, the first thing is we need to be aware of what's going on, and we need to be talking about it, and we need to be calling it out. So that, I think, is part of the effort that you're thankfully engaged in now, is telling people, look, they're not hiding what they're about to do, and you're not going to hear this from the mainstream press, but it's clear, it's out in the open. Like, the secret really is out in the open. You just need to interpret it the right way. But I don't see any way around us. We need leaders. We need people who are going to stand up and start organizing for activist type behavior. And we need activism badly, right? So I was thinking this morning on the way in. Look, if we called a meeting of all the groups like the left did, all their activist groups, and said, okay, we're all going to go protest in the streets, I mean, what would that list look like, right? Who would be on it? Now, we would have a list of some groups, right?
Yes.
But it would be nothing like what they
Correct.
have. Thousands, tens of thousands of union members, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any way around people organizing for a kind of peaceful activism. There's no way around. We have to do that. We're going to have to create activist groups that organize people and that make our presence and our voice known. And we're going to need leaders for that, but leaders are made in situations like this where average people stand up and start to figure out ways to strike back. And, we're also going to need some of our political figures beyond Trump to start talking about this more explicitly. And if they don't, we're in trouble. And this is a time for those in the Republican Party. I know a lot of those moderates are scared right now because they see the purge that's coming if Biden wins. But we're going to have some courageous people stand up. And I think a lot of folks will rally to them if they start saying the words.
When you say we have to be able to strike back, how do you mean that?
Well, I mean that I don't see a way around making a presence in the streets known, having peaceful protests that counteract the protests of the left. I would like to say something else, something more intellectual, but no, we're going to need to be in the streets in some way, making our presence known, and then also
you don't mean with violence.
No, I mean actual peaceful protest.
Yeah, you're something modeled after Martin Luther King.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I think that would just imagine the imagery, right? I mean, you saw this a little bit happen with the statues. Some of my friends in Ventura, California, went and defended a statue of Saint Sarah. And, they at least prevented the mob from ripping it down.
Mm-hmm.
The city and cowardly officials got rid of it anyway, but they prevented it. And what you saw was, families and a lot of young men standing around the statue, and it was very peaceful. And just their mere presence was enough and when you saw the video of it, you could see the juxtaposition of them standing there peacefully and then other people yelling and screaming. That's ultimately what's going to be needed. And that's hard because, look, on the right, as we know, people are busy. They have a life. They have jobs. They're not paid to go out and do this. But I don't see a way around that. And, of course, there's more than just peaceful protesting in the streets. There's also the way you can organize online. And I think that we could, in our own way, make it hurt for the other side when they do things that we think are unacceptable.
In what way? How do you mean?
Well, I think that we're going to need a kind of boycott movement. It's hard to go after big corporations, but to swarm and make our displeasure known when someone says something or does something that we think is reprehensible. Again, this is not something we are used to doing. We don't want to act like the left and cancel people, but we do, on the other hand, need to have a public voice. And an example of that would be, for instance, you had Michael Anton on, my friend and colleague from Claremont.
Right.
When people issue really veiled death threats against him on Twitter, mm-hmm. that means we raise a ruckus and we keep some pressure on various people who've made those statements. We don't forget about it. We don't let it go. But we try to strike back in our way. Now, look, we're not going to just do what the left does as a mirror image, right? Our protests would be, in fact, peaceful, but there are ways to do this. And if we don't start figuring it out, we're in trouble. And like I say, it's hard because we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the billionaires funding activist organizations, and we don't have the billionaires getting all the smart people in a room to game out the war game of what's going to happen and how we could move chess pieces on the table, how we could possibly counteract this.
These people
and that's what's damning.
The people with money on the right are really shameful. They will be held responsible at some point in the afterlife, I think, for not doing everything they could to protect man's freedom. I cannot believe the way the billionaires on the right really rarely get involved in anything. It's tragically sad. We're talking to Matthew Peterson, the founding editor of The American Mind, VP of Education in the Claremont Institute. This really, the one way that the right can organize quickly is if it was led by pastors and churches, because they already will be able to say peaceful, and their congregations will understand that, and they will follow those pastors, and they'll follow them into hell if the pastors have the spine to do it. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, and I think that people of faith need to realize that this is not a drill. This is not an exercise game. The violent brown shirts that have been marshaled for the sake of political power by the left. I mean, it's only a matter of time. We already see churches being burned down. No one seems to be investigating or very interested in that. Why are people lighting churches on fire? We see this at the margins, but it's only going to get worse. And it really is ridiculous at this point. We know where this goes, and so if the churches do not step up now, if they don't start to protest now to counteract what's happening, then we're going to be in a world of trouble very soon, and we know where it goes. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion, as everyone's been saying.
We
can see this.
Everybody
knows.
We
need people with the bravery. And what I would say is, if you stand up, I know so many examples of people in their job, in their church. If you stand up and start saying some of this, you would be surprised at how many people will rally to you. I mean, obviously, be prudent. We don't want people to, just lose their job for the sake of nothing. But there are many examples where you would be surprised, if you're listening out there, at how many people agree with you. And in fact, a lot of these people agree with you, but they're scared. So what you need is, there's this ancient Greek analogy. And it comes from Homer. Everyone's in a retreat. Everyone's in a retreat in the Trojan War. And Odysseus stops one of the guys who's leading the retreat, and he whacks him with a stick and says, "Hey, we're going to stand our ground." And once they stand their ground, all of a sudden, everyone else starts standing around them. That's the reverse of the mob mentality. That's how you stop this. You need people standing up, and people will rally around you. But if the churches don't do that soon, government already has incredible amount of power over worship. They don't care about religious liberty at all, and they're going to say, you're all hate groups anyway.
You mentioned you heard something on NPR. I heard the same thing, and I actually pulled it for the show today. Let me play it again, please. This is the audio from NPR today.
But this time, as Facebook's chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg, told All Things Considered this week, these companies are concerned about what happens not just before the election, but also after November 3rd. Both Twitter and Facebook say they're now going to be cracking down on posts that say, for example, voting by mail is somehow fraudulent, posts that advocate violence to disrupt the transfer of power, or premature claims of victory. And they'll do that by either labeling or removing.
We should say that some of these kinds of messages and spreading doubts have come from none other than the President of the United States himself. I mean, does that fact complicate things for these companies and what they can do?
Well, you're right. We heard this again from President Trump this week at the debate. He suggested he might not accept the results of this election. In the case of Facebook, this company has come around pretty reluctantly to the idea that they might have to somehow moderate what the president says.
That's a remarkable piece of audio, especially if you read any of the stuff that we've been telling you I'm posting today at glennbeck.com. You can get it now. The Transition Integrity Project, what they're saying they're going to do and already are doing. They're already in the press. But in their own words and in their documents, they talk about that they have to find a way to silence any voice that can rally people. And they talk about first going to those people and asking for their better angels. Well, I haven't had a phone call from anybody on the Transition Integrity Project. I don't think Ben Shapiro has. I don't think Steven Crowder has. Can you give me your opinion on the silencing of voices? I'm lucky because I have radio. but silencing of voices online by just shutting down our pipes. We'll still be online, but no one will see us in social media. Do you believe that's going to happen after election?
Yeah, I think we know. I mean, let's believe what they're telling us, right?
Yeah.
The big tech companies have been nervous since 2016. They were blamed, obviously, for Trump's win, and they've had powerful forces in America going after them every day for 4 years ever since. Remember, the internet was great and wonderful when Obama was president, and then when it blew up in their face when Trump won, all of a sudden digital technology is terrible, and they came down on these companies. And sadly, of course, a lot of these companies broke. A lot of them didn't need much pressure to turn to the left. And so we will see how far they go. I would say a silver lining here is NPR is running this story because they're still trying to put pressure on Facebook, right? I mean, the reason they're running this story is also to put the tech companies on notice, to keep constant pressure on them to do what they want them to do, and so that's notable. It's not as if the tech companies are all one thing, but they certainly are not on our side. They certainly know what they're supposed to do and say, and unlike the right, the left maintains pressure on them.
Yeah.
And we haven't done that. To the extent we started talking about it, it led to great results. But again, we need leaders who are willing to stand up to them.
Thank you very much. Dr. Matthew Peterson,